If I was still the stoner I was in my 20s, I'd go, is it a coincidence that dog is God spelled backwards? Come and join us. Come and be a feminist. I just wish more women were excited about getting older. First of all, the alternative is terrible. It's just being dead. Hello, I am persistently and unavoidably Caitlin Moran, and I'm here at Penguin to answer some big questions.
Thank you very much.
It's not so much a question of can men be feminists, it's that men must be feminists. I am constantly saddened by the factions of feminism that say men can't be feminists, because all there is men and women, and we're all in the gang together on Earth, and if men want to come and help us, that's great. We've helped men loads. We're having their babies. We're the ones that know how to use the dishwasher. If they want to come and help us with some feminism, I'm fine with that. I'm tired. Anybody who wants to help with the feminism, I'm very happy to have on board. When I first became a feminist, and when I wrote the first book, How to Be a Woman, whenever I would do public events, within the first 2 or 3 questions from the audience would come the question, but what about boys? What about men? You've written so much about women, but what about men? And at the beginning I was a bit like, I don't know, I don't care. I'm team tits. Like, I write about women, that's my specialist subject. The ultimate irony of feminism would be, would it not, if having solved all the problems of women, that women then had to solve all the problems of men as well? I just don't know. But as time has gone on, I'm starting to realise that feminism is described as the belief in the social, political and financial equality of the sexes. And there are inequalities for men in the same way that there are inequalities for women. We talk about what the inequalities for women are. We still have the pay gap. 1 in 4 women will be sexually assaulted or raped. We're seen as weaker. We know all the problems that women have. But sexism brings with it problems for men as well. The leading cause of death for men under the age of 50 in this country is taking their own lives. Men are more likely to lose custody of their children in divorce battles. So the ideas of what you are as a gender have bullshit on both sides. And the only thing that will cure that is feminism, is being able to use these tools that feminism gives us to go, what are the problems associated with gender? Do you want to conform to your gender stereotype? Are there things in that stereotype that are making you unhappy or limiting your life? Then let's use these tools of analysis to take them apart. Come and join us. Come and be a feminist. I mean, I look back on video footage of myself now at the age of 32 and just think, God, you knew nothing. I know this is a very common thing, but I seem to be genuinely half asleep. Like, I mean, I was genuinely half asleep because I had 2 small children. But there's just something brilliant about getting older. I just wish more women were excited about getting older. First of all, the alternative is terrible. It's just being dead. So getting old is always awesome. But secondly, one of women's problems is we just care too much about what other people think about us. And that just erodes like your skin elasticity as you get older. Like, you get to 45 and you just don't care what anybody thinks about you. You can look back on a life where you pushed genuine human beings out of a frankly inappropriate hole of your body and survived it and thrived. And you're like, well, what else can the world throw at me that's worse than that? You enter what I like to think of as my hag years. You become a hag, you become a witch, you stomp around, you wear the clothes of a hag or a witch, you wear loose, baggy things and colourful things that make you feel jolly. You have a very strong bond with your dog. Gardening becomes incredibly important. I always keep a swimming costume in my bag now, because if I see any stretch of cold water, whatever time of year, I want to put on my swimming costume and jump into it, because I've learnt that cold water is better than any drug I've ever taken. You come out of it covered in slime and mud if it's some stream or pond or lake that you've come across. Covered in mud, your hair all straggly, bright red with some weird rash, possibly picking a fish out of your bra, but you feel like a god. You just, like, when people look at me, they will cry at how beautiful I am, because you're so incredibly high. Cold water is not something for the younger people. A young, beautiful, skinny lady will not be able to jump into that cold water. She just does not have the body fat for it, whereas you get into your 40s, you've got the build of a walrus, and that lake is for you. When I was a child, I was pretty sure God existed. He was very green and very fat, and he was just a head that floated right next to the earth and was constantly looking at us with what I realise now was quite a camp side eye. It was basically someone who looked like Matt Lucas going, what's going on there? I find myself occasionally praying to God, even though I don't believe that God exists. I mean, to be all kind of, for a minute, like, kind of, I just think our sense of God is our sense of our better selves. Like, when, you know, I know when I'm talking to God going, please let me be able to stay awake and write this feature, I'm just saying that to myself. And I find it interesting that we have to pretend we're talking to someone else in order to be able to talk to ourselves. And if you can possibly get to the point where you're directly addressing yourself and that you are aware of the voice in your head and you are in charge of it. And again, I think it's something women are particularly prone to do. Sometimes we don't even realise we've got a voice in our head. It takes you to your 30s or 40s to go, oh, I'm talking to me. And then you go, but what is that voice saying to me? And that voice is often very unpleasant and unkind. And because it's the remnant of the voice of bad boyfriends that you've had, or horrible teachers, or possibly you've had bad parents. And I think one of the crucial parts in your life is the moment where you realise that there's a voice in your head and you are totally in charge of it. And you have to ask yourself, is that voice talking to me in the way that I would talk to my friend, or even my dog? And a huge breakthrough for me was when I got my dog and I spent all day going, you're so beautiful, aren't you? You are so good. Are you so good? Are you so good? And realised that I'd been nicer to my dog in 5 minutes than I had ever been to myself in my internal voice. So I've started off imagining that I was my own dog. And there's something very relaxing and pleasant about that. Just going, do you need to go for a walk? Yes, yes, I do. Do you need to have a snack now? Yes, yes, I do. Do you need to go and ask someone to stroke you? Yes, yes, I probably do. If I was still the stoner I was in my 20s, I'd go, is it a coincidence that dog is God spelled backwards? Maybe when you find a dog, you find God. But I don't think it is a coincidence. Talk to yourself like you would a pet. Ooh, social media. I mean, that's a mixed grill, to use the scientific term. On the bad side, it's a very effective way to go around scaring people, depressing people, threatening people, trying to crush conversation. I have seen, having been on social media sort of since the very beginning of Twitter, how it has influenced language and politics in the everyday. People forget that when Twitter first started out, it was parodically lovely. That was the thing that people would go on about Twitter. It would be like, oh, that's just the sappy place where the lovelies hang out, just being parodically smashing. A child would lose its teddy bear in Welwyn Garden City, and the mum would post a picture of it on Twitter, and then everyone would retweet it going, someone's got to find this teddy bear. It was just the place of smashing loveliness. And then from sort of 2012 onwards, we started to see this influx of trolls, because I think people had realised the good thing about social media, which is that for the first time in human history, all of the world could talk to the rest of the world unmediated. You didn't have to be on TV. You could just go on your computer and say something, and it could spread across the world if it caught people's imagination. And of course, the good side about that is that anybody can have a go, but the bad point about that is that anybody can have a go. When I get dolorous about this, I have to remind myself that it's still such a recent invention, this idea of people being able to torture each other. And what you've invented is a global consciousness that's still only a decade old. So it's still basically a child. We still haven't learned how to discipline it. We still haven't learned how to teach it things. We haven't started to teach it morality or help it become an adolescent form and then an adult form of communication. So even though it can be very easy to get depressed about what happens on social media, I just think that we're at the beginning of a process where we will show willing and courage and humour and just teach this little squalling baby that can be so problematic to grow up and to be as useful as it was at the beginning. Monarchy is a weird one because I always presumed that I was anti-royalist, you know, being working class, being brought up by Marxists and stuff, kind of like, who are these people who think they're better than us, and a hereditary thing, and that's all just bullshit, and it's oppressive to the peasants such as I. But then about 10 years ago, my mate pointed out that the majority of history books that I read are about the royal family and the craziness of the Tudors. And, and I love castles, and I love carriages, golden carriages, and I love crowns and jewellery and the madness of following one family who've been in power for generations and what happens next, and the archetypes and the power plays that come out off the back of that. So I have found myself to be inadvertently in favour of the royal family because A, it's fascinating. B, it's an enormous part of history that if this has managed to survive this long, then why would you stop it now? It's an extraordinary remnant. It's like if we had a couple of unicorns left, and you'd be like, well, unicorns are kind of unfair to the general horse population because they are more beautiful and loved and they have amazing pointy horns. But there's still some unicorns left, so let's keep them in the unicorn zoo and keep watching them. That's kind of amazing. The only bad thing for me about the royal family is that if I had a child that fell in love with a member of the royal family, I think I'd probably have to kidnap them and take them to another country and then erase their brain using some kind of love erasal machine, because I can't think of anything worse than being in the royal family. It's not like in Henry VIII's day where you could just literally kill people and stomp around wearing a massive codpiece and doing what you wanted. Now you're only allowed to generally stay in the royal family if you're completely perfect and serene at all times and have no opinions and lead a flawless life. And no one can do that, and it's an intolerable pressure. And if my daughter wanted to marry a prince, then I'd put her, ironically, in a turret. and I would lock her away, and I would surround it by thorns and dragons, and I would not let her do it. So I love the royal family. I'm just sad that people have to be in it for it to continue. It's difficult to talk about Generation Z because my children are Generation Z, so I don't want to make them feel too self-pitying or big them up in any way. I've still got to keep them under my thumb. The good things, the things that Generation Z have, which I wish I'd had when I was younger, were music is free and everywhere. You can listen to any song in the world in a second. Deodorant technology has really moved on. Everyone smelled very bad in the early 90s. The world just smelled of cigarettes and sort of that kind of oniony kind of bow smell that you would smell in venues. You are less likely to get camel toe in a pair of jeans now because it's just got more stretch. So these are the good things about being part of Generation Z. The bad things are, kids don't listen to this bit, politically things are really difficult, economically things are really difficult. Plus on top of that, kids know that, you know, we've got climate change and the possibility of the end of the world. I think it's really important for older people to not put that burden on younger people. I was really aware with my kids that they would overhear me and my friends talking about how difficult everything is now and how this is a world full of hate and kind of all the dolphins are dying and there's plastic bags everywhere. And then I'd see that they look scared. And then I'd go, but don't worry, because your generation, Generation Z, you're amazing. You've got Greta Thunberg, you've got Emma Gonzalez, you know properly how to use social media, you will organise, you will campaign, you're going to be so much better than us, you're morally better than us. Don't worry, you're going to save the world, it's all going to be fine. Thinking that I was in some way giving them a compliment, like you guys are better than us, so you will save the world. But of course, children don't hear that like that. They just hear, Mummy and Daddy can't sort this out. Help us. Like, we're screwed. Like, kids, quickly, come and rescue Mummy and Daddy. And we must not say that. It's not a compliment to tell the younger generation that they are better than us and they're going to save the world. Mummy and Daddy need to step up and say, look, we're going to do this together. We're not just going to leave it to you young guys. They don't need to rebel against us. We don't need to rebel against them. We're all going to have to go in this together and sort out the problems of the future. And I know that my mum didn't want to sort out my problems when I was a teenager, mainly because my biggest problems then was trying to work out who was best, the Stone Roses or the Happy Mondays, and she just didn't want to arbitrate on that. I think she preferred the Happy Mondays. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it didn't make anyone sad or offended. If you want to buy my new book, More Than a Woman, then you can get it here. And don't forget to subscribe over here so you can watch more videos like this.